Christopher's heart sank when he saw the folded uniform on the bed. Instead of the normal clothes he had been promised, there lay a neatly arranged set of plain training garments, soft fabric overalls, gloves for restricted movement, and protective padding clearly designed for the next stage of his rehabilitation. Helen noticed the panic in his eyes. "It's just a control suit," she said quietly. "Nothing to fear. It's meant to keep you centered and calm." He wanted to protest, but before he could, she was already fastening the thick belt around his waist and securing the cuffs at his wrists. The material wasn't harsh, it was smooth and strangely comforting. Still, the very act of being dressed like this filled him with shame and uncertainty. "The diet supplement I gave you earlier might make your stomach turn for a while," she explained matter-of-factly. "It's just to flush the last of the sedatives from your system. You'll feel better afterward." Christopher's face flushed. The embarrassment of his situation, the loss of control, it all came rushing back. Helen raised a finger to her lips. "Quiet now. Focus on breathing. Every reaction teaches you something about yourself." He swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. She guided him to sit, then slipped light fabric coverings over his hands, training mitts, designed to keep him from fidgeting or clenching his fists. "These make sure you can't hide tension," she said, cinching the ties gently. "You'll learn to calm yourself without using anger." Christopher stared at her, bewildered. "Why are you doing this?" he finally whispered. Helen met his eyes steadily. "Because for too long, you've lived in chaos. You've built your identity on rebellion and guilt. We're taking that apart, piece by piece, until you understand what peace feels like." He looked down, studying the soft, almost ceremonial fabric he now wore. It wasn't humiliating in itself. What made it unbearable was what it symbolized: surrender. Helen stepped back, evaluating her work. "Good. Now lie down. You need to rest." He hesitated, but the exhaustion was too much. He lay on the bed, the silk sheets cool against his skin. Helen sat beside him, one hand resting gently on his forehead. "There's something you should know," she said softly. "This program isn't about making you into someone else. It's about revealing who you've always been, someone kind, empathetic, and capable of control. But to find that person, you have to face the one who lost his way." He blinked back tears. "I don't know if I can." She smiled faintly. "You don't have to know yet. You just have to trust that you will." For a long time neither spoke. The tension between them slowly melted into something unfamiliar, not comfort exactly, but clarity. "Every choice from now on will define you," Helen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can stay angry, or you can begin to change." Christopher nodded weakly. His eyelids grew heavy. The steady rhythm of his breathing filled the room. Helen brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Rest now," she murmured. "Tomorrow, we start again, not as enemies, but as teacher and student." She dimmed the lights and left the room quietly. For the first time in months, Christopher slept without fear. Christopher's breathing slowed as he looked down at the uniform folded on the bed: soft fabric, neutral tones, structured seams. There was no lace, no glittering mockery this time. Only simplicity. But somehow, that made it worse. It meant whatever came next wasn't a costume. It was real. Helen stood beside him, calm and unwavering. "Tonight is about control, Christopher," she said. "Not mine, yours." He looked up, confused and trembling. "I don't understand," he managed to whisper. She smiled faintly. "You will." From the bedside table, she gathered a set of equipment: restraint cuffs, an observation strap, and a heart monitor band, tools she'd used before in her behavior reintegration sessions. Christopher swallowed hard. "What is this for?" Helen's tone softened. "You've spent months fighting everyone who tried to help you. Every time someone reached out, you lashed back. So tonight, you're going to stop fighting. You're going to listen and learn to stay still." She moved around him slowly, methodically, fastening the lightweight straps at his wrists and ankles. They weren't tight, just enough to remind him he was no longer in control of the environment. "This isn't punishment," she explained. "It's clarity. Stillness teaches you what chaos hides." He said nothing, eyes darting to the floor as she checked the monitor display. His heart rate was racing. "Take a breath," Helen said. "You're safe." He did. And to his surprise, it worked. His pulse steadied slightly. Helen nodded, satisfied. Good. See? Control isn't taken from you, Christopher. It's given back when you stop wasting it. She adjusted the temperature controls on the wall, then dimmed the lights until the room was wrapped in a soft amber glow. Lay back, she said. He obeyed. She placed a cool cloth on his forehead and sat beside him, her expression unreadable. Do you remember when you were little? She asked quietly. When you used to have nightmares and I'd stay until you fell asleep? He nodded, barely breathing. Well, tonight's the same, she said. Except now the nightmare isn't under your bed. It's in your habits, your anger, your refusal to change. But we can still end it if you trust me. Tears welled in his eyes, unbidden. I don't know how, he whispered. You don't need to, Helen said. You just need to stop resisting. For the first time in months, Christopher stopped arguing. The fear, the humiliation, the resentment, all of it ebbed into a quiet, exhausted acceptance. Helen placed her hand gently on his forehead, a gesture that was neither commanding nor tender, but something strange in between, clinical yet deeply human. You've come further than you think, she said. You've seen what rebellion does. Tomorrow you start to rebuild. But tonight you rest. He nodded faintly. The exhaustion hit him like a wave. His heartbeat slowed on the monitor's screen, a rhythmic, steady sound that filled the silence between them. As she stood to leave, Helen turned off the main light and paused by the door. Christopher, she said softly. All of this, the control, the structure, even the fear, it's not to break you. It's to teach you what strength really feels like. Then she left, the door closing with a quiet finality that carried more weight than any punishment ever could. Down the hall, Heather and Beverly were reviewing data logs from the sessions, planning the next stage of rehabilitation. The program wasn't just working, it was transforming both boys from reckless chaos into something new. Helen allowed herself a small, weary smile as she walked away. For the first time since it all began, she felt something close to hope. The two trainees shifted nervously, their breathing quick and shallow as Heather and Beverly exchanged a quiet laugh. You've been through the physical stage, Heather said evenly. Now comes the discipline test, the quiet. From the storage unit, Beverly lifted what looked like a padded containment wrap, thick, flexible, and lined with soft fabric. This will keep your bodies still so your minds can finally listen, she said. The boys' eyes widened. They glanced at each other, helpless, knowing resistance would only prolong things. Don't fight it, Heather warned. The more you struggle, the harder it is to breathe evenly. Focus. Control. With calm precision, the girls helped the two step into the wide, sleeping restraint. The material closed slowly around them, shoulders, arms, and legs drawn together until movement was impossible. The design wasn't cruel, only absolute. Inside, the pressure mimicked a weighted blanket, steady, firm, grounding. Heather secured the final zipper up to their shoulders and checked their vitals on the monitor by the cot. Heart rate stabilizing, she said with a small nod. Good. Beverly adjusted the filtration hoods over their heads. The masks dulled light and sound, leaving only a faint scent of rose from the sterilizing filters. You'll breathe fine, she reassured. But every sound you make will echo back to you. That's how you'll learn to hear yourselves. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beeps of the monitors. Heather stood over the sealed cocoon. You'll stay like this through the night, she said softly. 13 hours. No movement, no talking. Just thought. When morning comes, we'll see who's learned control and who still needs to. Her words hung in the air as she dimmed the lights. The room plunged into soft, amber darkness. For a long moment, there was only breathing, uneven at first, then slowly sinking, two patterns merging into one. Heather watched the screens a final time, satisfied, and motioned to Beverly. They left quietly, locking the door behind them. Down the corridor, the sound of the latch echoed like a bell marking the beginning of a vigil. Inside the training room, the stillness deepened until it felt endless. Hours passed. The darkness became its own kind of mirror, forcing each boy to confront the echo of his own mind. Memories surfaced, every act of arrogance, every burst of cruelty, every glance of shame. There was nowhere to run, no one to blame. By dawn, both had stopped fighting. Their breathing was slow and synchronized, their thoughts hollowed into silence. When the door finally opened again, the bright morning light cut through the shadows. Heather and Beverly entered, smiling with calm authority. "Good morning," Heather said. "The longest night is over." The two boys blinked rapidly in the light. They looked exhausted, shaken, but something in their eyes had changed. The defiance was gone. In its place lingered an uneasy stillness, the quiet aftermath of surrender. Beverly glanced at the readings on the monitor and nodded approvingly. "Stable," she said. "They've made it through the night." Heather folded her arms, studying them with measured satisfaction. Then the real work can begin. She flicked off the monitor, and, as the screen dimmed, so did the echo of the night's ordeal, leaving behind only silence and the first fragile trace of understanding. A sharp voice cut through the silence. My, aren't we restless this morning?" Heather's tone carried its usual calm authority, but to the restrained trainees, it sounded almost mocking. The two boys tried to respond, muffled sounds of discomfort escaping the breathing filters covering their faces. From somewhere nearby came the faint laughter of Beverly, light, practiced, and cold. "Relax," she said, voice filtered through a protective mask. "You've been still for hours. Your circulation needs time." If the captives could see clearly through the dim blur of their hoods, they would have noticed how clinical the two girls now looked. Heather and Beverly wore long white aprons, protective gloves, and fitted respirators. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and perfume. "Time for phase 2, Heather murmured, glancing toward the sealed cot. She unlatched one side and, with careful precision, rolled both restrained subjects gently toward the edge. Every movement drew faint gasps, muscle stiffness, exhaustion, and emotional shock converging at once. "Careful," Beverly warned, her expression unreadable behind her mask. "They've been immobile for 10 hours. Then this will hurt before it helps," Heather replied simply. Slowly, the girls began unbuckling the compression belts that had held the subjects together. The pressure released with a soft hiss, followed by groans of pain as feeling returned to numb limbs. The air shifted, carrying the scent of sweat, metal, and faint disinfectant. When the containment wrap finally peeled away, the room filled with the sterile hum of ventilation fans. Both trainees stood trembling, unsteady on their feet, pale, disoriented, and visibly ashamed. Heather looked at them for a long moment before speaking. "Do you understand why this is necessary?" No response, only two muffled breaths from behind the soft filtration hoods. "It isn't cruelty," she continued. "It's reflection. People don't change when they're comfortable. They change when they're forced to face what they've ignored." Beverly gestured to the far end of the room. "Bring them to sanitation." The boys were guided, step by weak step, into a wide, bright chamber, the decontamination suite. Pink-tiled walls gleamed under overhead lights. Stainless fixtures glimmered across the room, dual sinks, 2 elevated rinse platforms, and a central drainage grid beneath their feet. Everything looked clean, too clean. Heather adjusted her gloves, speaking in that same measured, professional tone. "This room is designed for rehabilitation procedures," she said. "Temperature control, automated rinsing, sensory recalibration. Everything here exists to help you reset." A quiet mechanical hum filled the air as Beverly activated a wall console. From above, 2 slender chains began descending, part of the hydraulic lift system. "Just stabilizers," she explained. "They'll hold you upright while we clean the equipment off." The boys flinched at the sound, but did not resist. Their fear had shifted into something else: confusion, exhaustion, and a reluctant acceptance. The girls began removing the restraint fabric layer by layer. Every motion was methodical, nothing suggestive, just the impersonal rhythm of procedure. The process was quiet except for the occasional clink of metal or soft whisper of fabric being folded away. When the final seals were undone, the boys stood trembling, exposed only in the sense of vulnerability, stripped not of clothing but of composure. Heather exhaled slowly. "You can breathe now," she said, her tone gentler. "No more restraints." Beverly turned off the console and looked at them with something approaching pity. "You survived the first night," she said. "That's more than most could do." Heather's gaze softened for the first time. But survival isn't the goal, she said quietly. Transformation is. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then she nodded toward the shower alcoves. Let's begin the cleansing. The room filled with the sound of running water, clean, warm, endless. The hum of machinery faded under the steady rush of the shower heads, washing away the remnants of the night before. And as the two stood there, eyes closed, breathing deeply, the faintest trace of calm returned. The ordeal had stripped them bare, not of dignity, but of illusion. When it was over, Heather looked to Beverly. They're ready, she said. Tomorrow, they begin learning who they really are. A sharp gasp broke the silence. Then another. The two restrained trainees stood trembling, barely able to process what was happening as the chamber doors hissed open. Heather stepped forward first, her voice calm but cutting. My, she said. So much resistance. You'd think after all this time, you'd have learned to let go. Her assistant Beverly, standing nearby in her white lab apron and mask, allowed herself a small, knowing smile. They always fight the hardest right before they break through. The boys flinched at the sound of her voice. They were exhausted, disoriented, and still reeling from the long night of confinement. Phase 3, Heather said simply. Decontamination. She pressed a control on the wall. 2 sections of the tiled ceiling slid apart, and a pair of mechanical restraints descended smooth, silver, and humming quietly. The trainees froze. Heather motioned to Beverly, who approached one of the trembling subjects and began loosening the last of the upper restraints. We'll clean the chamber suits and calibrate your posture, she explained clinically. Both women moved with professional precision, no cruelty now, just efficiency. Still, the humiliation of exposure was unbearable. Every breath echoed inside the room's sterile air. Hold still, Heather warned, tightening a stabilizing harness across the trainee's shoulders. If you struggle, the system will counterpull. Just breathe. When the first mechanical lock engaged, the boy let out a muffled cry that barely reached the surface of the mask covering his mouth. Beverly sighed. Easy. The tension's only temporary. She stepped back and checked the readings on a wall monitor. Pressure stable. The two women worked in silence for several minutes, securing the trainees into standing positions beneath the overhead fixtures. Then Heather tapped another switch and warm vapor began to fill the room, light, fragrant, cleansing. This is a sanitation mist, she said. Designed to remove chemical residue and recalibrate body temperature. Stay calm. The vapor surrounded them, glowing faintly pink beneath the ceiling lights. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like being caught inside a cloud that pressed against every inch of skin. Heather adjusted the nozzles, directing short bursts of mist toward the boys' backs and shoulders. This step isn't punishment, she said softly, though her tone still carried command. It's preparation. You can't rebuild a mind that's still clinging to what it used to be. Beverly nodded, taking over the controls at the secondary console. Each phase resets them, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. By the time this ends, they'll either break or wake up. The noise of the machines deepened, a steady hydraulic pulse filling the tiled space. Warm water coursed down through the vented floor, washing away what little strength the captives had left. Their bodies trembled, not from pain, but from the sheer sensory overload of heat, light, and noise. After several long minutes, the mist faded. Heather powered down the system, and silence reclaimed the room, broken only by the slow drip of condensation from the ceiling. Vitals steady, Beverly reported, checking the biometric tablet mounted to the wall. Temperature normal. Cognitive stress levels dropping. Heather exhaled and unfastened her gloves. Good, she said quietly. That means they're starting to let go. For a moment, she simply looked at the two figures before her, tired, unrecognizable, standing motionless in the sterile light. Then she turned to Beverly. Disconnect the restraints. They'll rest before the final assessment. Beverly obeyed. The mechanical arms rose silently back into the ceiling, leaving the room strangely empty. When it was done, Heather leaned close to one of the trainees and whispered through her mask, Tomorrow, you start again. This time, you won't need the bindings. You'll choose stillness on your own." Then she switched off the lights. The door sealed shut with a quiet hiss, and the room fell back into darkness, clean, silent, and waiting.